Nothing short of a disaster. The Brooklyn Nets drop game number 2 in Boston, down 0-2 in the series. And we're going to get into why Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are solely responsible for this loss right after the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yep, it's the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, for better or worse, the Brooklyn Nets every single day. I'm Adam Armbrecht. He's Doug Norrie. And listen, we're going to have a hard time here. Cannot get through the, the cold opening, as they call it in the biz. Having a hard time getting through the intro. Doug, why are you laughing in the background? This is serious stuff here. We're going to get into Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and their performances, what went wrong or right in this game. Not a lot of it on Brooklyn Nets side of things. And just how shocking a second consecutive game like this for Kevin Durant really is.
Well, I'm laughing for a couple of reasons. One, I'm trying to keep the bum meter in check here because I think we're probably in a situation where, you're driving with someone else and you get the traffic and the other person gets way more pissed off than you do. And you're like, well, it's not going to pay for both of us to be pissed off because then it's just going to make the car ride a totally miserable experience. I felt like I probably had the way emotional reaction to game one. I have a feeling here you're going to have a much more emotional reaction to game two. I'm also traveling, so I'm just in a totally different space, so I can hear just stuff going on outside, which maybe is going to bleed through. So I'm just giving everyone the heads up on that. I'm in the Boston area, watched the game in a Boston related bar, or Boston adjacent bar for the first half, and then I came home, and so got the best of all the good stuff happening in the first half, and then only to come back to have it just turn into a total nightmare. So I think my emotions around this one are running the gamut. We have tons to talk about, but I don't know if I'm going to devolve down to the level of your bummedness because I believe that would only make for a really depressing experience. It's not because I'm just not bummed out. This is a terrible loss.
A little bit of levity at the top, which is a good thing because I know this is only going to get darker and worse for me as we move along. We ran the poll over on Twitter, by the way, friends. Bum meter. Bummer scale? Bummer scale 1 out. Bummer scale 1 out. And that's where we stand. If you're over on YouTube, you can check it out. Now, it doesn't mean this isn't about
real quick. If you just looked at this, does that mean when the bummer scale is all the way full, it means you're the most bummed you could be? Is that
I'm fully in the bum.
That's so for those that can't see it, there's there's a full bar. It's fully filled in. Yeah. That means Adam is filled up with all his bummers, all the bum, all the bum that you could ever have. He's filled up with.
It's because I'm gonna tell you right now, man. You said it about the feeling coming out of that first game, but by the end of that episode and that post game, I came to the place of being right, but what are the chances? And I think I put them essentially at 0 that Kevin Durant is going to have another game like that. He had another game like that. And I can argue it's worse. I don't care about the stat line. I don't care about the box score. I don't care about him getting to the foul line more, which is something that I called for him to do after the first game, which he managed to do and somehow have it be meaningless. This is an all-time, this is about as big of a no-show from a superstar as you could have over the first 2 games of a series. This is everything you bank on about why being a 7th seed doesn't matter and all the ups and downs of the regular season and everything else. Just get us there. This is about Boston's defense. We're going to talk about all this different stuff, but it's inexcusable. It's inexcusable to be Kevin Durant and have back-to-back games like this, to say nothing of Kyrie Irving. We'll get to in a second as well. Yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun. It's not funny, Doug.
Okay, he's 13 for 41 from the field to start the series through the first 2 games. That's obviously so far below his efficiency rate over the course of the season that it's only 2 games, but it's quasi alarming. I would say that if you just watch the shots, you would think, okay, you're just maybe running bad from the field. It can happen in shorter sample sizes. I do think the more of the actually concern comes from the other parts of the game that seem completely out of whack, the inability to dribble at times, the inability to maintain a dribble, the inability to have fully weighted passes, to the point where I'm not suggesting this to be the case, but when something looks this out of whack for a player that's this good, my mind actually does turn to hey, I wonder if he's hurt a little bit because, and this is, think about a pitcher in baseball, where if you watch a lot of baseball and it's hey, a guy that's really good on the mound just lets up, 5 earned runs in an inning. and then 8 earned runs for a game. And you're like, oh, and then 24 hours later, they go on the 10-day DL because there's something wrong with their forearm, right? Like, you can put in you go in lockstep for times like this when it happens with guys who are very repeatable with their performance, right? Guys who are it's just game in and game out. It's just pretty much the same. These guys, Durant is like this. He's as efficient as it gets. So when across sort of the whole game, it looks bad, I'll actually just wonder if something else is wrong. There probably is nothing, but it's only to speak to how good he is that when it looks this off, you just have to start questioning other things because he's just too good. It's you know what I mean? And
he actively dribbled into traffic in congested areas. And to your point, it's like
he just actively just dribbled like essentially out of bounds. There's multiple times. So
yeah, he had a lack of and this is where I'll say so. And I know that you're not hanging your hat on Kevin Durant must be injured.
No. Sorry,
you're saying
I'm going to clarify. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to clarify. He's not. I do not believe he's injured. I'm saying that when it looks this out of whack, you go to other external factors that might be the cause of something, only because it does not compute with your eyes around what you know around Kevin Durant, which is to say he's a nearly flawless basketball player over almost the entirety of his career. And these 2 games have looked anything but that.
So lack of spatial awareness, lack of the secondary defenders that were able to come over. They said it repeatedly on the broadcast of Kevin Durant didn't realize that he was not taking on a one-on-one defender. There are things that fundamentally do not resonate as being Kevin Durant traits. And then on top of that too, man, I'll go an extra mile here. I know we're going to get to Kyrie Irving as well. But the other part of it was, the careless turnovers, we talked about that down the end of the regular season. That felt like a bit of an issue there. Listen, took 5 personal fouls in this game. Feels like everybody kind of picked up their fouls in that regard. But he had 5 assists. Like the one thing that we talked about, and I said it coming out of that game 1 as well, is, hey, if Boston wants to play you this physical, and if they're going to throw the double teams at you, if they're going to run the blitzing action, then you have to be willing to lean into the other areas. And when we talk about the supporting cast later, it's not like people weren't ready, willing, and able to step up. So the fact that it seemed like in some ways, boy, it goes wrong in game number 1. It's surprising. You're thrown off by it all. You can't believe that you didn't rise to that occasion. When it continues to go wrong in game number 2, you got to pivot. You also have to be good enough to know, how can I continue to impact this game in a positive way? And you don't have to look far in the contrast to what Jason Tatum did in this game, where he did not have the same big scoring performance and effectiveness that you would expect from him on a consistent basis, and yet go inside of his box score. It looks a lot more balanced, looks a lot more even, and down the stretch, he made the plays that mattered most. So the contrast here between the best players on each side is also what creates this bigger divide around expectations and then the reality of what we got.
Yeah, like it was just the whole thing looks off kilter. And when your best players are off kilter, it's not going to be a surprise that other pieces of the game look off kilter, right? Like if Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving can't get their games going, it's going to be nearly impossible for the rest of it to happen. Like you just need these guys. This isn't high level basketball X's and O stuff, right? If your superstars are not going to be good, then you are going to struggle to win. That, especially at this time of year, that's the story with the NBA. It's not rocket science. Like yes, there are clear X's and O's things that can happen within the game that will help or hurt you. There's clear momentum things. There's referee stuff. Look, there's lots of other things. But you can kind of boil it down to, like, right? Like, it's not going to take, it's not going to take any basketball savant to figure out that if Kevin Durant's going to play 40 plus minutes per game and shoot 31% from the field and 35% from 3, like over the first 2 games, the Nets are probably going to lose those games. I actually would not have need to watch the games. I don't even need to know what's happening in these games to understand this part. Like, this is sometimes how easy it gets. The good news is sometimes as easy as just that turns around and you start winning games, right? And it could be that easy. But it's just, if this is what's going to be the case, this is actually why, weirdly, with about 4 minutes left in the game, I just kind of made my peace with this game. Right. Like the game was still maybe a little bit hanging in the balance. There was a chance they were going to come back. I had made my peace with that. It was just not going to happen. Maybe that was a mental hedge, an emotional hedge, but there was also nothing pointing that it was going to turn around.
You know what even frustrated me? God, I mean, I am having a bad. This is gonna be a bad one.
Right, buddy.
It pissed me off even more that in a game like in a game like this where you're not getting your looks, it's not falling for you. Then down the stretch when you're down 5 points. You're in a 2-possession game, and I get even after all of this, would you still stand there and say, who do you want to put the ball in the hands of, Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant? You live with the results. Okay, fine. But now I got a really big sample size. It's not going well. And Kevin Durant made some active choices to be like, you know what? I'm going to keep going for it. I'm going to try to rise up on a triple. And I understand the mentality. Like, I get why he does that. And I get that the result of him missing those shots only further compounds my frustration around this particular performance or these two performances. And even still, like, we're going to get to them. Like, other guys had showcased that they were capable of making shots here in this game when it mattered. And this is a philosophical thing. We're going to get into Kyrie after the break here, but when you don't have it, like you said, if you're that pitcher and you're giving up runs early because the fastball just doesn't quite have the speed, maybe you got to go to your other pitches and try to see if you can still give a quality performance for your team overall, because the money ball is not there. It's not working for you. And that is as frustrating as anything else out of this game, is that Kevin Durant did not manage to find a different way to have an impact. He just kept banging his head against the wall, expecting different results.
All right, I'll push back against that a little bit. I'll also tell you why maybe this game should have been a blowout. So I'm going to go two competing different directions on this one after we tell you about our friends over at betonline.net. I got to be honest, I'm going to go over there because they don't have it up right away because it usually takes a little bit. But betonline.net, I got to feel like right now, the Celtics are probably something like minus 350 to win this series. It was minus 220 going into this game. So over on betonline.net, because I looked it up before the game went off. But Boston had climbed a little bit in the old championship odds too. That's only going to probably climb as well. Go check it out for yourself over at betonline.net. You can find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, news, including this year's basketball playoffs, like we talked about. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sport wagering information, live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head on over to betonline.net. Right now, you can learn about all the trends, all the different action. It's all popping off over there. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, so before we get into just Kyrie Irving's performance as well, and then we can just the general game at all, overall, it ends up being 114-107 is the final tally. It's really done a little bit earlier in the fourth quarter. But go ahead, push back.
Oh, and Katie.
Yeah.
Well, I guess at my point, at this point in where we are in the series, season, is that this is still Kevin Durant to me. Streaks are not predictive of what the future holds. Like if you are just okay, right? Like if you're not injured, let's say, let's remove that part again, which I just introduced as just one of the, I'm not, again, I'll just re-say this. I do not think he's injured. I'm just trying to explain the unexplainable here. At that point, if everything's okay, in a vacuum, I always just want Kevin Durant taking more shots than anybody else, because that is going to be a key to success. I understand what you're saying, where it's just not happening, but you can only lean on that for so long because you just need Kevin Durant to make shots. And so that's the only reason I'm only pushing back on that piece of it, because I actually just don't think it matters either way. Like, I think that this thing was headed in a direction of, it kind of
hold on then, because let me ask you were about to say why this game could have been a blowout, but I'm going to keep coming back to, let's fold in Kyrie Irving here as well. He has an off night as well. The only
did he even play? I'm being serious.
Yeah, well, and listen, for whatever it's worth, the reason why we start on Kevin Durant and why there's no passes for the superstars, you got to play better. The fact that he just gave you 39 points in game number 1 is why I can say, hey, listen, this is one off game for Kyrie Irving, not necessarily multiple. And then there's no excuses. It's just information. Kyrie Irving, obviously observing Ramadan. He had to leave at whatever it was, the 5-minute mark of the first quarter, when the sun finally set and he was able to go get himself a little something to put in his body. It marked like 13 and a half hours without anything in his system, all that good stuff. And and that's why the game on Sunday, when it was in the afternoon, I guess maybe mattered, because it was earlier in the day for him. And this could be an impact on this series, especially a physical one. But to your point,
I'll say to that. I'm okay, fine. Let's just,
and no excuse on that either. Like, that's
he played 40 minutes. He played 10 points. There was times where I just completely forgot he was even playing. He was completely non-existent. You would be hard pressed to find 5 good things that Kyrie Irving did in this game. I love Kyrie Irving as a basketball player. No one has been more complimentary of him as a basketball player, so we don't need to check the tape on that. This game, you would not have known he was playing. If you were dropped in from another planet and needed to pick who the 5 best players in this game were, he would not have been in the top 10. Like, it was a terrible, terrible game from him. He could not find any shots. He was not seeking the ball. The ball was not getting to him. There was just nothing happened for him. He had, like I said, he had 10 points. The offense was a complete and utter mess, basically, for everybody. So I guess this is all wrapped into it. And we'll talk, we're going to talk to Matt Brooks, and we're going to talk like some more X's and O's stuff around this. But like, yeah, like we spent the first section on KD. Kyrie is just as culpable here. You got a 0 from him. You'll never win. You'll never win. Like, that's it. If Kyrie Irving scores 10 points in a playoff series, you can just say the Nets lost that game. It's pretty easy.
And I'll put the most one of the to me one of the more damning stats in it as well. We all understand Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving need to score the ball first and foremost. He had 1 assist.
Well, real quick about the assist, by the way, because I just looked this up.
Yep.
This was the Nets' least assist in a game for the entire season. It tied.
And this is why. Yeah,
sorry, we're just talking to each other because we're upset. It was on January 13th. They had 16 assists. So this tied for 2 other games during the regular season. And I'll look real quick about what that was. That game, judging by this, was almost definitely one of these COVID games, right? Like, but judging by this time of the season, so they had no assists basically for the entire, which is the story of the game. There was just nothing happening on offense. Their offensive possessions in the second half were just a complete F.
And by the way, we're going to, there's things to tip your hat to the Boston Celtics. This isn't 100%, Nets self-imploding themselves, and it's not impacted by what Ime Udoka and the Celtics did and all that good stuff. We'll get to that along the way here before game number 3. But the majority of it, the responsibility still falls on these 2 superstars' shoulders. And when you see those assist totals, again, this is where, because you said, this what could have been or felt like or should have been a blowout. The Brooklyn Nets were leading this game. They were up by 10 at the break. They were up by 5 going to the fourth quarter. And I'll just contend that when you look inside this box score, and you talked about nothing about this game went right, but you still got your 18 points from Dragic off the bench on 8 of 14 shooting. You still got Seth Curry giving you 6 of 11 and 16 points. Bruce Brown gave you absolutely everything that he had to give you after having a no-show performance of his own in game number 1. Like, everybody else checked those boxes, and there's some chicken or the egg around this, I guess, of when the 2 superstars aren't playing well, other guys are going to look better. But like you say, still 13 attempts for Kyrie Irving and 17. They combined for 40 attempts in this game, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. So it's not like they didn't sit there and say, we're not shooting it all and we're going to lean to something else. These other players still had good performances in spite of the fact that Boston was obviously choosing to frustrate Kevin Durant. But Kyrie Irving wasn't being taken out of this game. He took himself out of this game.
Real quick, when you heard me say that should have been a blowout, who did you think the blowout should have been for?
Oh, I thought you were saying it should have been Boston should have blown out Brooklyn.
Correct. Okay, I'm just making sure we're on the same page. Yes,
okay. I disagree with that. I'm saying that everything else in support of the 2 superstars, like you got what you needed. You had 3 supporting cast members do exactly what was expected of them, and borderline. Dragic does a little bit more than you anticipate from him, but he's been good these first 2 games. 3 guys check the box for you. Drummond has a better game by expectations of what you need him to do, and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving don't hold their weight. Like, that's what didn't happen in this game.
Gotcha. I think, and this is totally a tomato or tomato situation because it doesn't really matter. I would say the reason it was, and again, this is non-provable and maybe just a non thing, but like, I would say the only reason you didn't get completely smoked is you got kind of miracle games from these other guys, right? And like, that's the only thing that ended up happening. Again, it doesn't matter. It all points, but wherever we come in on that angle, it all points to the same place. So it all points to the game was bad, and we can be disappointed by it because of these other situations. We get to be disappointed because you got A+ stuff from the role players, where if you get A+ stuff from the role players, you say you have to win. You have to win.
Yes, yes.
If you get this game from Dragic, this miracle game where he cannot miss, you have to win the game. When you get Bruce Brown coming out and scoring the first 9 points, right? And looking like the Celtics have made the biggest mistake in the world by choosing to ignore him on defense. You think you just have to win. You're rolling downhill. And then the flip side, obviously, is when you see sort of just how bad it goes in the aggregate for some of your other guys, you think, how could we ever win? Yeah. Right? Like, how did we not lose? How did we not lose by 20? Like, it all points to the same thing.
And by the way, it's like, it's funny because we're going to get into some coaching things here. I saw some comments over with our YouTube channels, and it's actually for the first time over actively having conversations there as well with some of the fans, which is always great to do. When you look over at Boston's box score, the old 19, 16, 15, 12, 22, 17, and 10 in terms of point contributions down the line. This is the difficulty around a team like this and just a matchup like this where they are consistent, right? They do have value that they can go to over their 7-8 man rotation. And really, when you talk about bringing in Pritchard there in the fourth quarter, like there are these extra pieces that Boston can go to and continue to produce waves of issues for the Brooklyn Nets. So, John said this, Carolus said this from Locked On Celtics when we got on before this game. He said there was still room for Boston to improve and have better overall games in a lot of different ways. I don't think they necessarily played a perfect game either again in this one. Like, I don't think either teams are giving you their absolute best versions of themselves, which can be disappointing in its own regard. But that balance is what's going to be problematic for the Brooklyn Nets.
I'll tell you right now, Carolus is going to be insufferable. I don't know. I'm never going to be able to do a crossover with him again.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going into the city to meet up with him ahead of the game number 3 on Saturday like I planned. There's no way that I could possibly.
Only bad stuff has happened since we talked to him. So I don't really know.
Things were going very well before we decided to do a crossover, so there could be something there as far as that goes.
Carolus never coming on the pod. We'll tell you about it why right after this.
What we'll also tell you about is why looking at Steve Nash and coaching adjustments that should have been made in this game can seem like the easy solve, but you'd be wrong. Right after we tell you, of course, about our friends over at Built Bar, because Built Bar, as you know, is the kind of protein bar that I need to reach for after watching Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving give performances like that. It also makes me wish that I could kind of mind meld myself with them and make them eat a protein bar like Built Bar, because we know it's absolutely good for it. It's covered 100% real chocolate, and they've got the stat lines like only 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. We know if you're reaching for one of those disgusting candy bars with 240 calories and over 30 grams of sugar, no, my friends. Get those Built Bars. You know it's going to be good for you and delicious. We know you get over to Built.com. If you can think of a great tasting flavor, they've probably already made it, whether it's going to be mint brownie, coconut almond. You know that cookies and cream is over there. I've been enjoying myself a little bit, indulging. You get over to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off on your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off on Built.com. So here's the thing. I'm gonna wrap this into a couple of spots, and you can have your take on Steve Nash. There are clearly make your one first, because you said about the game flow. You get this sense in the second half, the third and fourth quarters, everything essentially is going wrong, and at some point you look to the coaching staff to say we need to reset things here.
Well, there's a point in the fourth quarter when they've gone about 7 possessions where it's been a long 2-party, right? Like a long contested 2-party basically. And I believe like one of the only shots they made was that terrible Dragic, like just basically throw it up behind himself, long 2, and then or like at the end of the shot clock, and then they luck box into a 3-pointer. I mean, other than that, every shot, and that was a terrible shot, but every shot was terrible. It's clear that the crowd is completely starting to, and I'm never like this. Believe me, Adam and I have talked for 10,000 hours. He knows I will never bring this stuff up. But there is a point at which the intensity of the crowd is feeding some of what's happening for Boston, because we know that while Boston already has a great defensive system, so much of that defense is also effort. And a lot of effort is adrenaline, especially at that point in the game. And a lot of adrenaline can feed off external factors. Like, I think that's a pretty clear pathway, right? Like 1-to-1 to 1-to-1. Where the game is going terrible, it is starting to swing. It has already swung in the fourth quarter, where you're up 5 going into the fourth quarter and you are now losing. You have to, at some point, call like multiple timeouts just to quiet the crowd down. Believe me, how many podcasts have we done? Hundreds. I never bring this up because I most of the time think this is a garbage take that is built on making excuses for whatever. In this scenario, it's sort of inexcusable to not reset and say, hey, we have 2 great offensive players in this team. We have to settle down. We have to just take the crowd out of the list. We have to start trading baskets. Even if it's non-schematic, it has to be sort of momentum stuff, and he doesn't do that. Absolutely atrocious challenge by him. Doesn't end up really mattering on the Kyrie swipe at Tatum, whatever. I'm just kind of piling on him at this point. But
I was going to bring that up though. He challenged, I thought it was on the Drummond swipe over Horford, whichever it was. He challenged that there, and that effectively was the timeout as well. I mean, and again, it's too little too late at that point. I think to your point, like, you're not settling anything down at that point. But that ends up working as a timeout effectively because it stops and everyone takes a minute and everything else. Now, the problem with that situation is when they show the replay on the big screen and it feels like it's not going to get overturned.
And then you lose, and then you lose, and they make the free throws. Like, that's not that's not a good choice. That's not what I'm talking about. Like, that is not a momentum.
Yeah.
And I'm, I was watching this with a buddy, and we were just kind of talking. We were talking it out during the game, and it was just like very clear that this was sort of what was happening in the tide turning. And especially when you have your superstars struggling, like you have to just settle things down a little bit and get into some kind of action that you think you can get an easy shot off. Look, KD missed a lot of even his easy ones tonight. There were very few easy ones, but there was definitely a lot of shots that he just makes all the time. These elbow pull-ups where he is like, where there's very little contest that we're just running long. Look, it might have just been one of those nights. Maybe it doesn't matter. But the part where the momentum piece is so, to any person that's ever watched anything would know, like, this is just not going in your way at all. You have to just reset things a little bit. It just didn't happen. So anyway, I'm not pro timeout's always the solution for everything, because I think that's usually pretty garbage. But I think in this case, it stands.
And the Brooklyn Nets have been prone to be a team that when the runs start to happen, they tend to extend. Like the Nets have given up big leads. We know that, right? Like, so they're capable of that, especially coming out of the break, in the third quarters. So I think there's validity in that statement of like, hey, this is a team that's shown they have a hard time just working through it actively on their own, and stepping in there to push the pause button certainly could have been an option for them.
And by the way, and that's a good reference point, because we saw this. How many times did we see this over the course of the end of the season with clearly inferior teams getting themselves back into games? The Pacers, the Rockets, the Blazers, like every team along the way that the Nets failed to put their stamp on games when they could have, got back into the games because the Nets struggle with this stuff during against the bad teams. Well, now you're playing a team where that will kill you. Like if you cannot stop the bleeding against the good teams, you will lose. Like, and this little death by 1,000 paper cuts thing that happened to them at the end of the season, which they just barely sort of got over the hump on at times, right? Like the Knicks too, where they just got all the way down and had to come back. Like all this stuff where they just failed to play complete games. If you do not do that at this point in the season, you're just going to lose. And so I don't know. It's just frustrating.
Well, and I want to round that. I want to round this into what we expect, coming back on Saturday. Obviously, we're gonna have time to get into that here when we talk with Matt Brooks, as you said, and get into some more of the X's and O's stuff. The other thing I was like, again, and this is just pulse of the fan base, and I get it, and we talk about it. Am I sitting here telling you that Steve Nash is one of the best coaches in the league? Certainly not. But there was some sentiment around the idea that, boy, Dragic is really playing well. You got to get him out there. How'd you not use him for the entirety of the third quarter? Essentially, comes in with a little over a minute left. What I'm going to tell you is this is the same reason we talk about Patty Mills, and he went through his ebbs and flows. Doug dissuaded the idea that he was, falling into the tank. It's just the general arc of his season from a shooting standpoint, but he is older. Like Dragic is older. You're not running Dragic for 48 minutes in a game. Like he looks good in the first half. I don't think you can overgo to that well. Now, could he have played more minutes? Maybe. But I think that this is the balancing act when you get inside the supporting cast of saying, like, none of these guys can give you too much more than whatever that benchmark is. And that's why you don't have these secondary options to go to when the stars are not being effective.
Well, you know what? I'll say this too. And we should have just brought this up earlier. We'll stick on Dragic here. The Dragic thing, I'm with you that he's a veteran. You can't play him forever. You have to just see the wheels come. The way he's playing, I think you do have to see the wheels come completely off. Like to not have him. He needs to play more than 20 minutes in this game.
And let me be clear, whatever he was at from a minute share standpoint, when it was waning in the third quarter, and they're going, "How are you not using him in the third quarter more?" My thesis was, well, he's probably going to play all 12 minutes in the fourth quarter, and
20
that's what
minutes
you're saving him for. And that's the difference here. Like, I'm not against running him hard and long when you need to. I thought they were saving it for the right moment. So actually, I routed myself into a criticism of Steve Nash. I only defended not having him in there more in the third quarter, thinking it was going to be he'll play every second and give you every ounce of offense that he can. Now, by the way, he started missing some of his shots, whatever that could be indicative of. But that was my anticipation. I thought you would have seen him at 25 to 27 minutes. When that total doesn't end up there, this is when you take the step back at the end of the game and go, well, now I do look back to the third quarter and say, hey, where's that 3 or 4 minute run?
Yeah, because he was really the only effective Nets player that was plus for this game. He was +1. By the way, +17 for game one. We have some kind of minute. We have 46 minutes of +18 basketball from Goran Dragic. And for the minutes, for him to look as good as he looked in the first half, which was basically, again, like one of the main reasons they extended the lead, and then to only play 20 minutes total is pretty egregious. I don't know what actually the thought process is really, because short of like, they forgot to put him in. I don't know, because he played 6 fewer minutes in this game, and I know he was awesome in the first game. He felt arguably better in this one.
Okay, then let's go back to the top of this. Then we'll close out. I want to look at just get your take on where Game 3 stands right now. But I keep coming back to this. It's like you want to say that Dragic is playing well, or that Bruce Brown is having the game of his life, whatever. Okay. And we want to go to those guys more often, more frequently. But we're also saying, though, we want to go to Kevin Durant and have the ball in his hands when it matters the most, even though he's having a second consecutive terrible performance for himself. Like, where is the balance sheet on saying, like, I get they're the superstars, but at some point, you have to read the room and go, well, Dragic is having a really good game. Bruce Brown is being effective. Seth Curry is still able to knock down some shots here. Like, we just need to accept that our best chance of winning this game against all reasonable conversation is to not have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving be the guys with the ball in their hands when it matters the most. And that does come down to coaching. I just don't know if you can say, Kevin Durant, we're running several sets here over the last 6-7 minutes of the game where we want you to be distributing the ball to someone else. And then if they make it, it's great. And obviously, if they miss it, we're going to sit here and say, what were you possibly thinking not going to the Superstars?
Yeah, but that's a little different because that's not exactly what I'm saying. Like, he need not give the ball up to all these guys. I'm just saying strictly from a why isn't he on the court more, right? Like maybe he's on the court and Kevin Durant still does whatever Kevin Durant does, but playing 6 fewer minutes in this game where his minutes had been essentially the only good thing you had going on offense for long periods of time, for him to not play. Hey, we'll just see what happens later when he's in the game, but to not even be in the game, you'll never know. Like you're gonna miss all the shots you don't take in this scenario. So I just that's more of what I'm talking about.
All right, looking ahead to game 3, just quickly here. We'll talk X's and O's as we said on the next day. But do you look at this now? If I'm going to try to drag myself out of the darkness, it's a 7-game series. You need only steal 1 on the road. Boston did what they were supposed to do, win their home games. Now Brooklyn gets to come back and they get to try to win their home games. Do these 2 games, and maybe specifically Kevin Durant, does that dissuade you of the idea that Brooklyn should look at this and say, hey, this is just about saving face here? We're not even going to get into the Ben Simmons update and everything else, or that it's just, now go home and again, go right back to the well. Kevin Durant's not going to perform like that for a 3rd consecutive game. We'll win that first one. And then you look at game 4 and you just continue to build through. Like, this is the nature of long series, right?
Yes.
You can't get caught up in a game by game, what could be, as opposed to what you think you are capable of, which is certainly having better performances.
Series is not over. No, I do not feel that way. I do not feel the series is over. This is why they make it 7 games and not 2 or 3. I was getting 3. This is why it's not the.
You can never make it 2 games.
It's not why it's the NCAA tournament. I got kids screaming in the background, so we're gonna get out of here.
They're upset about
this series. Not over. Boston held serve. The games were close. For the most part. This is a very evenly matched series as far as I'm concerned. Still, I'm not dissuaded from that idea. I do not think Boston's some way better team by any means. I don't think we've seen really any evidence of that. Like, I think they are a very good team. The Nets are also a very good team. Things broke right / worked out well / they played better in some key moments. Yeah. The series is not over. They lose the next game, I'm going to have a different take on that. But as of right now, no, I don't feel that way, because all that the playoffs, if you watch enough basketball, the playoffs are just filled with examples of overreactions from beginnings of series, right? Like, where you feel like you've learned everything you can learn. Right. And then it turns out that you find out that you did not learn everything you can learn. There's lots more to learn. So I still see these 2 teams as very, very evenly matched. And the Nets got 2 not great results from the first games. And it's going to be very difficult now for sure. Like, they have dug themselves a hole here. But no, I don't think there's any rollover situation here.
All right, let's just clean it up, fellas. We'll get back after it. Get us out of here.
All right, go over and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Really appreciate it. Everyone that jumped on. Obviously, appreciate that John Corrales jumped on. Just kidding about never having John Corrales. Not kidding about having him ever come back on the show again.
R.I.P. John Corrales.
Yeah, go and subscribe to Locked On Nets YouTube.
And of course, my friends, you cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. John Kabat-Zine.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We will be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.